UVA has been a huge part of my life forever. And Eric, I really appreciate all those comments. Yeah, I've been very active with the university on this topic. It's near and dear to my heart. And I'm hoping because you're on the Zoom today, it's near and dear to your heart. So let's just talk a little about my resume beyond what Eric said, or just maybe enhancing what Eric said. There are three things that I think make it super natural for me to want to talk about this topic. First of all, 3 decades of being a financial advisor. I can't believe I'm saying 3 decades to anything. I'm also a parent of two teenagers, one of which is at the university right now. And as Eric mentioned, I think my best qualification for this topic is being a high school soccer coach, because the financial advisor part lets me figure out, okay, what is it that I need to teach? The parent is, I understand the dynamic between the parents and the kids. And then the high school part of it is, I understand how that teenage species, middle school, high school child thinks. And I didn't understand that my first year of coaching, but after 11 years, even I could figure that out. And you think about the things that we as parents complain about, right? The things that most commonly come out of my mouth are things like, can you get off that phone? Or can you finally clean that room? As it pertains to money, though, it really is two things that we as parents tend to kind of complain about. The first is, my kid thinks that money grows on trees. The second is, my kid doesn't understand the value of a dollar. And I think that not only have most of us on this Zoom thought that or said that to our own kids, our parents probably said it about us, and their parents probably said it about them. It's this constant thing that goes from generation to generation. And you know that saying for the definition of insanity, doing the same thing and expecting a different result? Well, for this, it's doing or not doing the same thing in terms of not educating our kids properly on this topic. That's definitely not leading to good results. And I think that when I sit in front of kids, I think back to when we were kids. And you look at these people on the screen right now. It's pretty funny because you probably know all, if not most of them, because of the horror stories, whether you like athletics and there was Allen Iverson or Kurt Schilling or Mark Brunell, or if you like actors and actresses, Nicolas Cage and Lindsay Lohan, or my favorite, MC Hammer. Don't worry, I won't do any singing or dancing right now, but MC Hammer, he was amazing. At one point, he had $30 million in the bank. $30 million. Yet he somehow wound up buying this huge monstrosity of a house. Then he went on and bought all of these cars. Then he went on and bought stables. In fact, I think he had 19 horses. And as the story goes, in 1996, we all know what happened to MC Hammer. He went into bankruptcy, and I think he was something like $13 million in debt. So help me understand why we were looking at these people and looking up to them. And now our kids are doing the same thing, not with these six on the screen, but things that are YouTubers or TikTokers. These are who our kids are looking up to, who are seemingly wealthy. Or are they? Now, when I talked with a lot of the kids that I teach, there's this difference between the word rich and wealthy. Rich is kind of like means like having a lot of income coming in, right? And just because you have a lot of income coming in doesn't necessarily mean that you're wealthy. When we think of someone as rich, we look at their situation and we say, oh, they must be really rich. They have a big house and nice cars and things like that. But there's a difference between rich and wealthy. And wealthy is not necessarily having a lot of assets, but it's having a lot of assets that can produce income that can give you financial security later in life. And that is from a money standpoint. I'm not talking about other things like family and health. That's what makes someone wealthy. You're wealthy when you can make decisions because you want to make them, not because you have to make them. You see, if you're rich, your income stops, that can go away. Or if you don't have any income and you don't have any liquid assets, all of that stuff goes away. And so when it brings to mind this great proverb, which is shirt sleeve to shirt sleeves in 3 generations, I'm betting a lot of you have heard this one. You'll remember this. The first generation, they build the wealth. This is the story of, oh, they came over on the boat from Italy. They had nothing in their pockets and they amassed all this wealth. Well, then the second generation, they maintain the wealth. And these are typically the kids who go and get, advanced degrees. They may be graduate from the University of Virginia with their undergrad, their doctorate, their master's, whatever that might be. They become things like accountants and attorneys or bankers. So they maintain the wealth. But it's in that third generation, which is really interesting to me, that they squander the wealth. And the question that you might ask yourself is, why in generation 3 do they squander the wealth? I think it's because families aren't having conversations about money at the dinner table. And that third generation doesn't understand what the first generation had to go through to get that money. And I think that that's part of the reason why we're saying things like, my kid thinks that money grows on trees. So if we were sitting in a room together and I asked you this question, I said, what do you care about personally the most? And I gave you those 8 options to choose from. And I said, just choose 3. So from leisure and pastimes to home and lifestyle, family and personal relationships, money and finance, mental, physical health, your career, personal development, political engagement. In your mind, I'm not going to ask you to write it in the chat, but what are the top 3 that you would pick? So ready for this? I'm going to do a Jedi mind trick, which is going to blow you away. Well, it's not really. It was a study that was done, and most people are answering the same way. That the top 3 areas of those 8 seem to always be family and personal relationships, mental and physical health, and money and finances. Like more times than not. Here's the irony to all of this, that if your money and your finances are in shambles, or if they're creating you an inordinate amount of stress, that usually takes its toll on your health and your relationships. So there's a really good case to be made here that if you don't have your money and finances together, there's a good chance that you're going to be having problems with one or both of either your relationships or your health or both. So what does that tell us? It tells us exactly what the Mind Over Money study by Capital One said. I'm going to save you 50 pages of reading and just get to the bottom of it for you. They said that if you have bad finances that leads to consistent stress, that's not good for your health. And this is of zero shock to anyone on this Zoom today, because we all know if you have consistent stress, that's not good for you. Yet we still keep putting not only ourselves, but now our kids under this potential to have this stress, and this stress has to deal with money. And so why is it that parents are not taking the time to have this conversation? I like to call it the Bermuda Triangle of parent excuses, which are not enough time, not enough knowledge, or the schools are going to handle it. So let's play that one out. If I asked everybody, where do you think the primary responsibility should be to teach kids about money? More times than not, if I gave you the choice of school, home, trial and error, friends, social media, or fortune cookies, sorry, I needed something in there to be funny. There's my fortune cookies. It's obviously not that one. Do you realize that 93% of us, 93 agree that schools need to teach kids more about personal finance? Okay, so pretty much in my mind, that says we almost all agree that schools need to teach this. Yet when you see this slide on the screen, right now, as of today, there are only 9 states that require a standalone class that gets tested in order to graduate high school. Now, this is moving in the right direction. Actually, there's a UVA alum who lives on the West Coast who's doing a lot of work making sure that this legislation gets passed in a lot of the other states. But help me understand this. How is it that every kid graduating high school, every kid graduating college, they are definitely going to need to interact with money in some way, shape, or form? Yet we're not making this a mandatory class. To me, that makes no sense. But listen to this. Even if, even if we were 50 for 50, that all 50 states had a graduation requirement for personal finance, it's not enough. Because show me a kid that learns about personal finance in a laboratory without any real life experience. I'm going to show you a kid who really didn't get the full gist of personal finance and is going to make a lot of mistakes along the way. It's super, super important that they get this real life experience coupled with that laboratory that they're going to get in the classroom. Now, there's this excuse of not enough time. And I love Tim Ferriss. You guys know him. He's the author of the 4-Hour Work Week. By the way, I need a 4-hour work week. Set me up with that. He said, lack of time is actually a lack of priorities. And the irony is we've probably said this in some way, shape, or form to our kids. But let me think about this for a second. So you say you have no time, but don't you have dinner once in a while with the family? Aren't you in the car taking kids to music practice, soccer practice, whatever practice, tutoring, this, that, and the other thing? Instead of starting off your dinner with the boring, so tell me about your day, why don't we try a different conversation? Because the tell me about your day is met with one-word answers. You all know, how's your day? Good. What's new? Nothing. Do you have anything coming up in school? No. So it's this one-word answers that you're getting. Instead of asking that question to get the predictable one-word answers, how about we ask them a question like, what do you know about budgeting? Or have you ever heard of compound interest? You see, we can use that time at the dinner table or that time in the car as our money chat time. Not all the time that you get to be annoying to your kids. Let's face it, we're already annoying to our kids, so we don't want to add to that list of reasons to be annoying. But every once in a while, it might be a really fun conversation to have. Now, that third part of the triangle, which is the knowledge part, this part I totally get. I know personally, I don't love talking about things that I'm not knowledgeable about because I just don't want to seem like, for lack of a better phrase, dumb. But let me put it this way to you to maybe give you a different way of thinking about it. Here's the question. Is anyone here on this call today? Are you a professional cyclist? I'm not talking about you go out on Saturday or Sunday with a couple of friends and you go biking. I'm talking about you earn a living from cycling, like Tour de France type stuff. I've never had anyone say yes. I probably will never have anyone in my audience that says yes. But here's the thing. Didn't you still teach your kids how to ride a bicycle? The audacity of you to think that you're not a pro cyclist and you had the guts to teach your kids about riding a bicycle, you should all be laughing right now because we all do it. So the question is, you're not a certified financial planner. Do you still have enough knowledge to teach them some things about money? Things like you get a credit card statement, right? Or you maybe own or rent an apartment, right? These are all things that we can teach our kids about without having to be an expert. And why? The same reason you want to teach your kids to ride a bicycle, you just want them to be safe and secure. And so what you do is you're not a pro, but you get them going and eventually they pick it up. The same thing happens with personal finance. You don't need to be a professional cyclist to get them going. So what happened? The story is the pandemic hit. I was bored out of my mind. I had nothing going on. I had a son who was probably about 15, 16 years old during the pandemic. And I just felt like we needed to do better as a society in teaching kids about money. And I believed it needed to happen at home. So I took the time and I wrote a book. And the book is It Makes Total Sense. You'll see I have 12 chapters. These are the 12 things that I thought would be a great starter to get the kids going. And so it could be getting money in their hands, or the value of a dollar, or budgeting, investing, philanthropy, borrowing and credit, taxes, insurance, legal documents. 12 things that I thought, hey, If you just gave your kids a little bit of an experience with these topics, their curiosity might take over and they're going to be in a better spot once they go to college. If any of you are on this Zoom today and you have college students already, it's okay. You still have time. But the reason that there are 12 chapters is because I wanted this to be a once a month type of conversation. 12 months in a year, 12 topics. So let me tell you how I envision this going in everyone's home. And it's super simple. I'm going to call it 3 to 4 steps, and you'll see why in a second. But here's how it goes. You first are going to read a chapter, then you're going to listen to a quick podcast episode. This is the one that's optional, and I get a lot of pushback on it. And I hope that you don't hit end meeting now after I say it. If you want, it might be helpful for you to send them a TikTok. Can you believe I just said that? I'm asking them to use more TikTok, right? And then finally, the fourth, you have the conversation, either in the car ride or at dinner. So let's jump in a little more to this. So the book, it's actually not a book. It's probably more like a guide because you're only reading 1 chapter a month. Now, listen to me again if you missed that. I'm the only author you'll ever meet who says, don't read my book cover to cover. Read 1 chapter a month. And here's what I wanted you to see on the screen. Check this out. You see those little white boxes with the numbers next to each chapter? That's not the chapter number. That's the number of pages it takes in my book. So you'll laugh. The first chapter is about the importance of getting money in their hands. I got a little carried away because I was super excited to start writing. It was 11 pages. From there, then you can see I got a little more real. And the other chapters are somewhere between 6 and 9-ish pages. So it's not a big investment of your time to read a 7-page chapter in the course of 1 month. Then what we did is I teamed up with my local library. Yeah, can you believe that? So I live in Westport, Connecticut. We have a library that's very into audio and video, and they wanted to produce a podcast episode that went along with one of each of my chapters, each of my lessons. So we put that together. We got that going. Each podcast episode is under 10 minutes. So this can be used as you're driving somewhere, or you're taking a walk, or you're at the gym. It's 10 minutes, and I want you to understand what that is. I want you to think of me as your coach. And when you listen, each lesson is going to sound something like this. Like, today's lesson is budgeting. Here's why. Then what I want you to do is you're going to sit down, and here's how you're going to open up the conversation with the kids at dinner. Then it's going to be the use of Socratic method, where I have 4 or 5 questions that I want you to ask. And here's how this is going to play out. I'll give you the first question and you'll ask it. And then I'm going to give you the answers that you're most likely to hear and what you want to hear in their answer. So you'll ask the first question and I'll tell you what they're going to say. Then you'll ask the second question. I'll tell you what they're going to say. And this is what happens in the 10 minutes of the podcast. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, wow, who does Tom think he is, knowing what my kid is going to think? Well, I don't know exactly what your kid is going to think, but I had 2 kids of my own that I put through it. And then after the pandemic, I brought in their friends one by one to join us at dinner, and I practiced. And here's what I found. I had some epic wins where I asked a question and the conversation was phenomenal. I also had some serious losses where I asked questions and fell on deaf ears, and it just was a disaster. But what happened after I did this over and over, I figured out these are the good questions to ask. These are the ones that I should avoid. And here are the answers that I'm likely to hear. Now, here's the part where you're going to get on me, right? This social media. And is it the friend or is it the enemy to our parenting existence? Now, what our parents used to complain about were those darn advertisements on TV, right? And they blamed everything that was going wrong in the world on TV and the advertisements. We are blaming social media. But check this out. You see these 2 charts? I love these. If you look to the one on the left, It says social media sources where young adults receive financial information. Check out the top three: YouTube, Reddit, TikTok. And now if you look over to the right-hand side, which are the most trusted social media sites for financial information, again, the top three: Reddit, YouTube, TikTok. So we can either try and fight this where our kids are at, or we can try and meet them where they're at. And here's the beauty of this, that once they start to look at personal finance TikToks, the algorithms take over, and all of a sudden they start to get more TikToks that are about personal finance and financial literacy. Look, I don't know as a parent that I would complain so much about my kids being on TikTok if I knew they were getting educated from it. Okay, so then I'm going to take you through, before I get into the question and answer, I'm going to take you through a sample chapter and give you an example of how I see this going down at your kitchen table. So for argument's sake, I'm going to choose chapter 5, which is compound interest today. I happen to think, and I think I saw someone had a question on which do I think is the most important. That's like saying, what's your favorite kid? I'll never answer that. But I love compound interest because I think it covers a lot of other things, including investing and saving, including taxes. I think if you teach them about compound interest, it gets them excited about a lot of other topics. So let's take you through it. So why teach them about compound interest? Well, of course, critical thinking and math skills. This is like real world stuff. It encourages the savings habit. So in order to get compound interest, you have to have money that can get compound interest. In order to get money, you have to save. In order to save, you have to budget. In order to get the compound interest, you need to invest. And if you invest and your money grows, you're going to have to pay taxes. You see why I love this one? But I think it really provides the foundation for financial literacy because it includes all of those different other aspects in the lessons that I have. And so you need a conversation starter. You don't want to just jump into it. I always love this quote from Einstein, who said, compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. Those who understand it, earn it. Those who don't understand it, pay it. Now, I like this, and I'm going to wrap this in at the end of the talk with the kids too. So I start off with that quote. It sticks in their head. It's not me saying, it's Albert Einstein. So, if I say it, I'm the parent. What do I know? But if Albert Einstein said it, well, then maybe he knew. So the first step is you go big picture, which is why I think it's why should they care? And you might be surprised that I start with a conversation about inflation. And I ask them, what is inflation? And then I ask, how does that affect us? Now, parents, you are going to be tempted, just like I was, to ask a question. There's a 3 or 5 second pause, and you're going to want to save your kids. Don't do it. Ask the question and then go into silence, no matter how uncomfortable it is, because you want to get them talking. And I'll tell you why later that is. But you want them to understand that if they don't get compound interest, okay, their purchasing power is naturally going to go down every year because of inflation. So you start with that, and then leads into step 2. How do you beat inflation? Now, in that first step, I've probably talked about, my kids make fun of me with this. I always say, and my parents will back this up, that a slice of pizza when I was growing up was 90 cents. And I used to ask my mom, can I have $1 to go to the pizza place to get a slice? Well, that slice of pizza, which was 90 cents, I don't know where you live, but it's probably over $3 now. That's inflation. So you want to ask them, as it pertains to money, what is interest? And once you had that conversation, which is making money on your money, which is compound interest, that leads into that second question of what are the 2 types of interest? And one is simple interest, and the other is compound interest. And if you look on my website, at the end of every chapter, I've got a little QR code that takes you to these other resources. I even have a cheat sheet that you could print out for your dinner that has all the questions and all the answers that you're looking for, which are include a little doodad on simple versus compound interest, which leads into step 3 on this topic of compound interest, which is getting to the important relevance and asking them, why is interest important? And there, for all the reasons that we talked about, you want to just hear them say again, because I need to battle inflation, or it helps me make money while I'm asleep, or it helps me have enough money later on for the things I want. Now, we think about that as retirement. Trust me, your kids, for the most part, are not thinking about retirement. They're thinking about things like buying a car, buying a computer, eventually maybe some of the kids who are in college or right out of college buying their first apartment or house or whatever that might be. So that is the reason why interest is important. And now I like to make it fun, because what I want to do is what my kids call, I want to live rent-free in your head. And they say that joking around, usually as a sports metaphor, but I like the rule of 72. Now, I bet a lot of you haven't heard of the rule of 72, but it's super cool. It's a math trick. And basically, you can take the number 72 and divide it by whatever rate of return you think you're going to get. And that's how many years it takes your money to double. So let me start off with some easy ones. At 72, if you got, let's say, a 10% rate of return, it would take your money 7 years to double. If I switch that and I said we only get 7% as our rate of return, only 7%, some of you are laughing, right? But if you got a 7%, it would take your money 10 years to double. The reason why it's important to teach them this little math trick is they'll remember it and they'll use it in fun with their friends. But what happens is when they get into their real life, they're not going to forget the rule of 72. And they're going to know that they need to get whatever money they're getting from their first job, they need to save it so they can get it compounding right away. Because the earlier you start, the more your money compounds. And so in step 5, I had 2 kids. So there's nothing more fun than having a little game. So this was the game we played. And I said, okay, great. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a rate of return. And the first person to give me the answer of how fast does your money grow to double, okay, you gets a point. And I forget what the stupid prize was I picked, but we did something. So I started with 1%. If you get 1%, and my son said 72 years, he gets a point. And then I said 7%, and my daughter said 10 years. And we went on and on. Now, 7, 10, and 1 are super easy. Maybe 3, 4, 5 is a little bit harder math. So you might reserve this one, the gamifying it, for any kids that you have that are in middle or high school. But once you've done that, you've made it into a fun little game, you're not necessarily teaching anymore. You're just playing around. And then at the end of that little game, you want to wrap up every conversation. The way I wrapped it up is I talked about compound interest is your shield against inflation. Okay. And it's so important that you not pay interest, but you earn interest. And then I wrap it back in with that Albert Einstein, compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. Those who understand it, earn it. Those who don't, pay it. And if I can burn these things in their head in every chapter with every lesson, just a couple of things here and a couple of things there, I've now opened their eyes to a new world, a world of money. Let me give you a quick story before we go into the Q&A. So I'm driving with my son. I can't remember how old he was, maybe 12 or 13. We're in the car and he said, "Dad, check out that Tesla." So I'm embarrassed to tell you all this at the time that I said to him and made the mistake of asking him, "What's a Tesla?" And if your kids are anything like mine, my son rolled his eyes and he gave me that exhale, like, how do you not know what a Tesla is? And he said, "Dad, a Tesla are those new cars that are energy efficient." I, at the time, had never heard of a Tesla. Here's what happened from that day on. So everywhere I went, I started seeing Teslas. I started seeing them on the road. I started seeing them on the news, on CNBC. There was this guy, Elon Musk. Who the heck knew who he was? All of a sudden, I noticed it. It was coming up in conversations with other adults. Tesla, Tesla, Tesla. But do you see what my son did to me? He basically taught me about what Tesla was. And when it opened my eyes, all of a sudden around me, I started seeing Tesla everywhere. And therein lies the beauty of having these financial conversations, because you're pointing out things to them that they never thought of, that they never were seeing in their real world. And all you need to do is just give them a little push, a little prompt. And then all of a sudden, they'll start seeing all these financial lessons that are around them. And if you don't buy into any of that, let me give you one other great, great reason to talk to your kids about money. We as parents all hope that when the dicey conversations are coming up in our kids' lives, that they come to us first to talk about it, whether it's drugs or alcohol or sex or any of those dicey conversations. You want them to come to you. The problem is that teenagers, believe it or not, think you, the adult, are incapable of having an adult conversation. This is how teens think. And we all know that the more great conversations that you have with your kids, that leads to quality decisions. So if you want your kids to come to you with the dicey conversations, they have to believe that you're capable of having that adult conversation. And money is a very adult conversation. And your kids, while they won't tell you this while they're in high school or college, they'll tell you 10 years later that they appreciate that you brought them inside the kimono to learn about something that was formerly known as taboo in the household, but your money.